You're from England, I'm sure that you know that the tax year begins in April, and I think this is also the case for New Zealand, Canada, and the likes. However, the rest of the world just has their tax year at the beginning of January. And you might think that the English are just being awkward here, but I think you should know about quarter days. These are four religious holidays that were celebrated in medieval England, and all of them pretty much fell on an equinox or solstice. So there was Christmas in December, I'm sure you've heard of that one, and there was Michaelmas in September, Midsummer in June, and Ladies' Day in March. However, since the calendars changed in 1751, Ladies' Day now falls in early April, and it is from this date that you get the tax year. Anyway, let's start off talking a little bit about Midsummer, which is still celebrated in Scandinavia, Romania, and the likes. In Midsummer, huge bonfires are lit, and of course it was mentioned in Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream. Otherwise, Christmas I won't go into, and Michaelmas fell pretty much in harvest season. And there is a lingering tradition with this one because a lot of the older universities in England, like Oxford and Cambridge, begin their term dates on Michaelmas. Finally, Ladies' Day. Now this is in honour of the Virgin Mary, but because it was in March, it had a particularly important non-religious role, and that's because no ploughing or harvesting was done in March, so it was often the time when workers and landowners would get together and negotiate contracts, and from there that's how it became the beginning of the tax year. For a long time in many regions it was actually New Year for them. Now before I go too far into here, I should explain a little bit about New Year's. Now going back to Roman times, there was only 10 months in a year, and the year began in March, hence October being called October because it was the 8th month. Because a year corresponded with a consulship, it became a bit of a mess, and that's because they would often try and make a year longer or shorter to keep or remove somebody from power. 2 months were added and the year began in January, but at the Council of Tours in the 8th century they tried to move away from Caesar's pagan calendar, and they made Easter New Year's. However, Easter, as you know, continuously changes. So many people just use Ladies' Day as the beginning of the new year because it was a static date in the calendar, and it wasn't until the Renaissance that January became New Year's once again. And I should say that January isn't necessarily the clear or logical choice, it is just a choice. After all, the Persians celebrated New Year's in March, and the French revolutionaries tried to make New Year September. For any budding historians reading first-hand sources from, let's say, the 17th century, this is quite important because some people then considered January's New Year's, other people made March New Year's. So if you're looking at dates on these sources, it's sometimes hard to follow what's going on. You could read that an army was defeated in January 1642, for instance, but that same army set off in, let's say, March 1642. And the reason for this is because they considered March to be New Year's. So this is just something to look out for.